Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And jazakumullah khairan for tuning in to this quick talk. Inshallah, we are going to be talking about an interesting topic. And today's topic, it sort of comes from the fact that our religion works in a way where certain things can have a very, very large amount of reward. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his generosity, sometimes amounts a very, very small amount of effort to a very, very large amount of reward. And that's something that I'd like to touch on today. First, I'd like to touch with two stories or two hadith that come and describe or set the scene for us with this topic. Seek Jannah with one surah. The first story is the story the Prophet ﷺ narrates of a person who had a surah that they emphasized a lot on and they spent a lot of time with, and their love for this surah and the time that they spent for this surah ultimately resulted in success for this person. He ﷺ says that a surah containing 30 verses interceded for a man and stood in front of Allah and ensured that that person was able to receive the forgiveness of Allah. One surah. That was, as is well known, Surah Al-Mulk, one of the surahs that has a lot of emphasis in our religion. But the reality is that it's a short surah. That this person received intercession just based off his interaction and his connection with this one surah. The second story is the Prophet of Allah ﷺ's interaction with a person that used to be the Imam of Masjid Quba. Anas radiallahu anhu narrates that there was a person who used to lead the people in Salah at Masjid Quba. And this person, he used to do something a bit strange, in the sense that he used to stand in front of them and he would lead and he would read Surah Fatiha, and then after Surah Fatiha he would read Surah Al-Ikhlas. He would read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, and he would read this surah, and then after he would read another surah, and he would do that in every rak'ah. So in Maghrib he would do it, in Isha he would do it, in Fajr he would do it, and he would continually act in this way. And some of his companions, brought it up to him. It's like, what are you doing? Like, this is strange. We haven't seen anyone else do this. Why don't you just either read Surah Ikhlas or you read the other surah? Like, it's sort of, strange, and you're doing this all the time. And he says, like, no, this is what I do. If you want me to be the Imam, this is the way that I lead. Otherwise, I don't mind. Find another Imam. Ask someone else to lead. No, but they said, you're the best of us. You're the person with the right to lead. So you should be that. The Prophet ﷺ's practice was that on Saturday, he would walk from his masjid to Masjid Quba. So when the Prophet ﷺ came, they brought this up with him. And they said, look, our Imam, he does this strange thing. He reads Surah Ikhlas in every rak'ah. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him, why do you do this? And he says, this Sahaba radiallahu anhu, inni uhibbuha. Indeed, I love this surah. I do this in every rak'ah because I love this Surah Ikhlas. This Surah Ikhlas that is so short. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him, حُبُّكَ إِيَّاهَا أَدْخَلَكَ الْجَنَّةِ. Your love for this surah has made you enter Jannah. And this is Sahih Hadith narrated by Bukhari. That the love this person had for this simple short surah became the result for him to live in Jannah forever. And this is the motivation that we have for this topic. Seek Jannah with one surah. The question that we ask ourselves, the question that I ask myself, do I have this one surah that I really, really love? That one surah that is going to intercede for me on the Day of Judgment. That one surah that is going to be the reason that I enter Jannah. I'd like to put it to you today that we should try to find this one surah, and we should try to make one surah our source of Jannah. I'm going to propose that all of us try to seek Jannah with one surah. I would like to propose that for the next 2 weeks, most of us are in lockdown, that for the next 2 weeks, we pick one short surah and that we apply the 6 do's of the Quran to this surah. So I'm giving you a very, very structured way and very detailed instructions about what we should do. And I'm going to explain all of this. And like just one point I'd like to make before jumping into the other detail is that the person that the Prophet ﷺ says, you've entered Jannah because of this surah, is because of the love this person had for the surah. And as we know, the importance of the heart in Islam, basically this surah has to be something that enters our heart. And unfortunately, it's not something that we can guarantee. Oh, okay, Mukhlis said do X, Y, Z, 6 steps, follow the 6 steps, pass, enters the heart. No, it doesn't really work that way. We have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us into our heart. But we know that this is an outcome, and we can actually see if we have succeeded by checking the condition of our heart with respect to this one surah. Before I go into detail about how we should approach this and the framework that I'm going to propose, I just want to quickly mention that what we're seeking is Jannah. Like the bar is set very, very high because Jannah is something that is very, very high. Jannah is something that we need to be focused on. We need to be Jannah-focused Muslims. And basically, there's one hadith that sums it up. You know, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Jannah. He talks about how in Jannah there are cushions, how in Jannah there are rivers, how there are fruit in Jannah, and all of these amazing things. But we need to realize all of this in the context of this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentions, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, أعددت لعبادي الصالحين ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر على قلب بشر. It doesn't matter like how well you know cushions and rivers, and you might be a PhD in rivers. It's nothing like a river in Jannah. This cushion that you're going to have in Jannah is nothing like the cushion that you have on your sofa. This fruit that you're going to eat is nothing like the fruit that you go and you buy from the grocer. It's going to be so different. No eye has seen how amazing these fruits are. No ear has heard the amazing flow of this river. Your brain and your heart is not even able to comprehend how great Jannah is. This is what we are seeking. This is the lofty goal, and we put ourselves and remind ourselves of this. Then I just quickly like to clarify why I put the goal that we need to start and we need to focus on one short surah. Why did I say one surah? Why did I say short? Wouldn't it be better to, let's say, try to make our entry into Jannah many surah, like more than one? Or why don't we pick a big surah? And the big surah is better because it's bigger. There are valid points, but I'd like to point out why, the rationale I have behind this approach. The first is having a look at our reality. The reality is that in our salah, especially the daily salah that we pray, and most of the time our salah is very short, in the sense that we're not going to go and read 10 pages in a salah, even if we're at home and we're not going to the mosque. We have control over how long our compulsory salah are. But generally speaking, we end up reading the short surah. These short surah play a vital role in our lives because we read them very, very often. They become the source of our prayer, the source of our connection to Allah. So the first reason that I chose a short surah is because the reality is, for most of us, this is what we read in our prayer. And even the Prophet ﷺ, he would recommend the imam, if he was leading, old people or sick people, that you should read a short surah. You shouldn't make it hard upon the people that are praying. So the reality is, these short surah, they play a very big role in our salah. And if we make our connection with one short surah very, very, very strong, that gives us a very good chance of having a great connection in our prayer, of having great quality prayer. The second reality is that our reality or our connection with the Quran is not very great, in the sense that we always have things that we're aiming for, trying to get higher with our connection with Allah, a connection with the Quran. And we can't all of a sudden just say, hey, look, I'm this guy that, let's be honest, I don't really read Quran every day. It's an occasional thing. I might read a few times a week if I'm lucky, and I don't really understand much of it. All of a sudden, I can't just say, hey, let's set a very high goal. The reality is that the position that we found ourselves with respect to the Quran, and it's not just a personal flaw. This is a community flaw that we have, in the sense that when we talk about teaching Quran and learning Quran, it's very surface level, in the sense that it's just reading, basically. How do you read the ayah correctly, which is important, but we haven't really gone into depth with the meaning in most cases. In the Saturday schools that we have, the community schools and so forth, we don't really emphasize that very much. So just the reality that we find ourselves with the Quran means that we should set this as our goal. The second point that I'd like to make is with respect to the timing of this. So the first is that we find ourselves in lockdown, and at the very least, there's another 2 weeks of lockdown, but potentially longer. But I wanted to set the scene that we have 2 weeks till the end of August, and that we should assign these 2 weeks such that in these 2 weeks, we are going to focus on one surah. How beautiful, in the sense that we have this very short amount of time. 2 weeks is not very long. So far we've been in a very long lockdown for quite a while already, and it's only another 2 weeks, and you're going to find that 2 weeks fly. So why not spend that 2 weeks getting and interacting with one short surah? So it's perfect in the sense that just the timing of it. Number two is that we are in the month of Muharram, one of the sacred months where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies our good deeds, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to do more good. So we're in one of these seasons of good, and we need to take advantage of the seasons of good, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies our reward, encourages us to do more, and actually it makes it easy for us to do more. The third is that we are coming up to the days or the day of Ash-Sharh, which is, for many people is going to be Thursday, other people local starting on Friday. So inshallah, many of us are going to be fasting tomorrow and on Thursday, or Thursday and Friday, or maybe the day after Ash-Sharh. So this is already a season where we're trying to get closer to Allah. So we should take advantage of the fact that tomorrow we might be fasting, the day after we might be fasting, and we should start. It allows us to start straight away and make this a reality, and make this something that is going to change us. The other point, and this is a very, very important point with respect to the Quran, is that this was the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, their interaction with the Quran was in that they would take it and they would learn it in a very specific way. It was said that they would take 10 ayats, they would learn these 10 ayats, they would read it on another Sahaba and get it correct recitation. They would memorize these 10 ayats. Then they would ensure that they understood these 10 ayat. They would ask the knowledgeable Sahaba to explain to them. Maybe the Prophet ﷺ himself would explain it to them. They would take this and then they would stop. And they wouldn't say, I'm going to then continue to the next ayat. They would stop with these 10 ayat, and then they would try to ensure they understood it and then implement it in their life. And even if that took a while, and then after they felt that they had started to implement this in their life, they would move on. This is what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did with respect to these ayats. And there's even a narration that the Tabi'een found that hard and they reduced to 5 ayats. And they would do this. So this is what the Salaf used to do with respect to the Quran. The people that would be our role models with respect to Islam. So this is very, very, what I'm proposing is actually very, very similar to that. Take one surah and let's try to find it and understand it and try to find the way that we can implement it in our life, implement it, and then we can move on to another surah or other goals after this. So what I'm proposing is very, very close to the practice of the Sahaba. The last point I'd like to make is that this needs to be a motivation for us, and this needs to be a starting point for us to be on a very, very long journey with respect to the Quran till the end of our lives. Really, our interaction with the Quran needs to be such that every day we spend reading it. Maybe that's not something that you do at the moment, but let this very, very short experiment that you can do in the next 2 weeks be a means for you to taste the sweetness of the Quran. And I can almost guarantee that you will very, very much enjoy this. And that is going to be a source of motivation for you then to, let's say, become regular with the Quran. Sure, it's hard to be regular with the Quran, to assign time every single day to read it, but after tasting the sweetness from these 2 weeks of effort, you are going to be able to find yourself motivated such that I'm going to force it into my schedule. I must have this time with the Quran every day. Then you're going to find yourself, I must spend time memorizing more of the Quran. It doesn't matter where I am in life, however old I am and however busy I am. The Quran is going to be a priority now in my life, and I'm going to spend some time memorizing it. And I'm going to, maybe it's going to take me 20, 30 years, but my goal is that I want to memorize this Quran, that it's worth it for me, that I've started to feel the fruits of that. And I want myself to be in that, in this direction and this path more and more and more. And then you find yourself, I need to understand what I'm reading in this Quran. It's worth me spending those years learning the Arabic language. Even though that's going to take me a few years to make some good progress and start understanding the Quran, it's worth it. This long path, this motivation that I felt is because I've tasted the sweetness of the Quran. And then furthermore, I'm going to take it and start studying tafsir. As a literature, it's a massive, massive, massive field, and it takes a lot of time and discipline to go through, to build yourself up, because you can't just open up the big tafsir at the beginning. You need to start simple. There's sort of a step ladder that you go through learning tafsir, and there's a lot of tafsir literature. You can spend the rest of your life reading tafsir. So it's motivation for the long path, that let this become that fruit that you taste, and it's so sweet that it changes the direction of your life. Now, I'd like to point out that this goal that I'm proposing is a SMART goal. I mean, I know that I've mentioned the 6 views of the Quran there in the corner. I'm going to talk about those in a second. But I'd like to point out that, we talk about goals and then we talk about SMART goals. That in actual fact, what I'm proposing is a SMART goal. And I just want to make it very explicit. That in the sense that the S, we made it very specific. That I said, let's pick a short surah. Short surah is basically defined as, from Surah Duha to the end. That's usually considered the Qisar al-Mufassal, the shortest of the surah towards the end of the Quran. Pick something from those short surahs. So it's very specific in the sense that we haven't made it vague. I'm just going to spend more time with the Quran. Very, very, very specific. Second is that it's going to be very measurable. We're going to talk about these 6 views of the Quran. And I already mentioned that one of the outcomes, one of the primary things that we're focusing on is our heart, in the sense that we want to love this surah, that we want to love the knowledge that we gain out of it, and the things that we implement in our life because of it. We want to see the condition of our heart after this. And that's something that in some ways is not measurable, because you can't really tell, alhamdulillah, I'm sincere, tick the box. In some ways, but in other ways you can sort of hold yourself to account and sort of see, am I heading in the right direction or not? And now's a bit of a time where I'm just going to stop talking about the SMART goals and just jump to the 6 of the Quran, and I'll come back to the rest of the ART of SMART. The 6 of the Quran are 6 things that we need to implement with respect to the Quran, and that's something that is actually sort of the right of the Quran upon us. So in the sense that Quran is not just something to be read, maybe read in a ritual manner, like you read it in your salah, or you read it maybe without understanding. It's something that needs to be read, but then we need to imply 2, 3, 4, 5. The first is reading, and that sort of means that you need to learn to read the Quran in its Arabic in the correct way, but also reading it regularly. Memorizing, everyone should have some sort of goal with memorizing, because if you haven't memorized the Quran, or you haven't got into the flow of memorizing the Quran, it actually allows you to have so much more interaction in your salah. That allows you to understand so much more. It opens the gates, and it's a very, very important part of our religious tradition because of the many benefits of memorizing. Number 3 is understanding what you're reading, and that's a very, very big point. And I'm going to give you examples of how we should approach this do of the Quran. Number 4 is contemplate. So basically think about it, allow it to sort of contextualize itself in my life. How is this Quran relevant to me? And I'm going to talk about some of the steps that we can do with respect to contemplating. Number 5 is then applying. Every single part of the Quran has something that is directed directly to me and has something that I can apply with it. And I need to do that. The Quran is not meant to be something that we just recite, and it's just something that, doesn't leave the throat, doesn't become manifest in us. Rather, we need to try to be like the Prophet ﷺ, who was the Quran walking. Last is the spread. We have this greatness, and we're going to enjoy this, and we're going to find this, and we need to try to allow it to be something that we are sharing with other people, that we're spreading this khair, and that we're allowing other, our brothers and our sisters and our family members to be educated. The next part of the SMART goals is attainable. And I'm going to point out that this is very attainable in the sense that the goal is set relatively small because we're focusing on a short surah. And furthermore, we are blessed with this lockdown in the sense that social commitments have gone down, in the sense that, I have extra time, just the time that I would have normally spent, driving around in going to work or something like that, that's gone. There are certain extra times that I can now allocate to this goal. Relevant. Now, obviously, this goal is, I want to seek Jannah with a surah, and this goal is relevant to me because I'm a Muslim, and I'm a Jannah-focused Muslim. So this is very, very relevant to me. Of course, on top of that, the Quran is always relevant to a Muslim, every part of the Quran, and that needs to be something that I also recognize. The last is time bound. So I'm setting 2 weeks, and I'm saying I'm going to, at the end of these 2 weeks, I'm going to try to have finished, spending time in the 6 views of the Quran. So I'm not just leaving this, I'm going to just change my lifestyle overnight and become a Quran person. No, we've made a very specific goal. This is what I'm proposing to you, and inshallah, it becomes something that you're willing to take up. Now, what I thought I'd do is I would present a case study of myself, starting the journey of this and demonstrating how I would approach this. And, you can sort of take from that, and that can be something that you then follow. And the first is I have to choose a surah. Now, the thing is that basically, whatever your situation is, there is going to be a surah that is the ideal surah for you. However, I realize that that's not necessarily that easy to know if you don't have extensive experience knowing, these are the main themes of surahs and things like that. So you could ask someone, but I would just recommend choosing a surah that you just naturally gravitate to reading in your salah, something that you're already familiar with and you're already reading in your salah, something that that you really feel connected to, and just choose that surah, and that's that surah that you're going to focus on. So don't spend a lot of time in the choosing phase. It should be relatively obvious to you. For me, that surah is Surah Ash-Sharh. So that short surah is Surah Ash-Sharh. I find myself reading it a lot. It's a very, very relevant surah, and I feel that it's extremely relevant to the time that we're in, where there's a lot of concerns that we have. We see events overseas, we see local events in Sydney, and it causes a lot of worry. And Surah Sharh is an amazing surah, and for me it's a very motivating surah. So, and naturally, even before I started my journey towards the Quran and learning Arabic and memorizing Quran, I found myself as a teenager, let's say, reading this in my salah a lot. It's a nice short surah. It's very beautiful, and so forth. So this is the surah I'm going to do. And I'm going to go through a case study and show you what I would do with respect to implementing these 6 views of the Quran with respect to Surah Ash-Sharh. The first is read. And a point I wanted to make is that associated with reading is listening. You should listen to the Quran as well. It shouldn't just be something that you read. So listening to other recitation, listening to a family member read or a friend read. Trying to ensure that I'm reading with the correct pronunciation and tajweed. That might involve calling a friend or calling a teacher and just getting them to correct me, and reading regularly, reading this surah a lot, because you're going to find that reading is a key to opening up some of the other doors. And all the 6 views of the Quran are all related. So reading is something that we need to do very, very frequently. Likewise, memorizing. The thing I propose is that generally, if you're already reading it in your salah, generally you've already memorized that. But if you haven't, spend that time memorizing it. Recite it to a friend to ensure that you're memorizing it. You've memorized it correctly, that you're not making a mistake in it. And again, reading it in your prayers. The next stage is that I need to try to understand it. And I've broken the understanding into 3 steps that I would do. So I'm assuming that I don't really have the background in Arabic. Number 1 is that I would try to access the translation first. I want to understand what is the surface meaning of it. And what I would do is I would actually look at various translations, because remember, I'm focusing and I'm giving my all in this surah. I want to love this surah. I want to be this. I'm going to seek Jannah with this surah, right? So it doesn't just suffice me to read one translation one time. So I'm going to open, for example, so I've offered some resources. I'm going to open Quran.com. Quran.com allows me to look at a very large number of translations. So there I put 4 great translations that I can all read, and I can just get an idea of how different people understood the ayat. It's their understanding of it. But you can see it's relatively similar, but some of the words are different. Another excellent website is Islam Awakened. Islam Awakened actually lists all the, as far as I know, all the known English translations and lists all of them according to the ayah. So you're going to read like, something like 30 translations, or I haven't counted it. Not all of the translations are necessarily like reliable translations. Like they're translations that were written by Orientalists. There were translations written by people of different, sects and so forth. But nonetheless, it's a valuable resource that allows me to read all the different translations of that ayah and really get a sort of a wider understanding without having necessarily access to Arabic. Just another resource I mentioned is quite nice is this Quran in Pictures. It has all these short surahs drawn out. Another resource I'd recommend, it's meant to be for kids, but I believe that it's very, very suitable for people of all ages, is the Clear Quran for Kids, which is available from our brothers in Project Quran. So that's a resource that I very recommend, and it's very, very well done. Then continuing on, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just spend a few minutes demonstrating one thing that I would do, and I particularly enjoy doing and benefited a lot, which is listening to the recitation read in Arabic while reading the English translation. So inshallah, I'm going to read Surah Ash-Sharh for you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to read the translation. So if you would please, don't really focus on the Arabic, focus on the English while I'm reading the Arabic. And you realize, because your English is fast, you can probably read more than one translation while I read the Arabic. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And then we have the opportunity after that is then to actually make sure that I understand each of the words. So going word for word and making sure that I'm clear with all the vocabulary. I know what alam, what nashrah, what laka, and what sadrak means, so forth. One recommendation is to use Quran.com. You can actually put your cursor over the word and it tells you what that means. So that's a great resource that I recommend. Another is, I haven't actually looked at it, but the reviews are very good. The Clear Dictionary, the Clear Quran Dictionary by Mustafa Khattab, also available from Project Quran, is another source looking at the meanings of words. It's not specifically for a certain surah, it's just like a dictionary for overall Quranic words. For Arabic speakers or people that are capable of reading Arabic, I highly recommend to read Mufradat al-Fadl al-Quran by Raghib al-Asfahan. It's a very, very good book, and it goes more in depth of each word. So you look up what does sharh mean and so forth, how does Quran use it, and it gives you some. It's not very, very long. Each entry is relatively short, but it does give you a lot of benefit. Next is then to go on to tafsir or explanation of the ayah. I'm trying to get as much understanding as I can for the ayah, and this is probably where you're going to spend a very large amount of effort. First, you can also always go to English translations of tafsir. So there's tafsir Sa'di, tafsir Kathir, there's other ma'arif al-Quran and so forth. It's translated from the Urdu, and the English is occasionally a bit awkward, but it's still a good resource going through these. And if we're just reading the tafsir of a short surah, you'll find that it's not much reading at all, really. Then just another point I'd mention, if you do know Arabic, there is a website called furqan.co. Type that into your browser, furqan.co. And it just has all of these tafsir available at your footprint by the ayah. You search up a certain ayah, and then you can search up a very, very large amount of tafsir, and it's very, very amazing. It's like And it sort of puts the level up there, like, why do you want to learn Arabic? Part of it is just that you want to be able to read tafsir, because that then becomes your key to learning and understanding Quran. Then I would go through and I would look for YouTube lectures. And I would say, like, just in terms of English, there is a very large amount for these short surahs. So, of course, I would look up, for example, Sheikh Yahya. It was only like 10 minutes. I listened to it today. It's very, very nice, very concise, beautiful. So, like, he just point, and absolutely smashes it. So that's a very short tafsir that I could, for example, listen to. For example, Sheikh Navaid has tafsir al-Juz' Amma, so I can listen to what he said. It's slightly longer. I could listen to Sheikh Abu Bakr. That's a lot more in depth. I think it's multiple parts. And then I could listen to, for example, Ustad Tim Humble from the UK. I could listen to, Ustad Nu'man Ali Khan. There's a bit of drama, but he's still a great resource. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward his efforts. We have, for example, another Sydney local, Bilal, who's then also given her tafsir. We can listen to that. We can listen to Ustad Ak. There's more than this. And these are great examples of what I listen to get a very good understanding of Surah Ash-Sharh. And they're going to go in a lot of detail, especially once I combine all of these. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get into the contemplate. This is where basically it is an endless pit not a pit, but it is endless in the sense that the time that you can spend in the contemplation phase is very, very long. So let me give you an example of what some of the things I would do with respect to contemplation. So one of the things I do is I'd spend time looking at relationships. So why is this surah called Ash-Sharh? What's the relationship between that and overall the surah? What's the relationship between, for example, each ayah? Why is Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak the first ayah? وَوَضَعْنَا لَكَ ذِكْرَكَ. What's the relationship between ayah 1 and 2? So looking at the relationship between each ayah. Looking at the relationship between Surah Ash-Sharh and the surah before it, which is Surah Al-Duha, there's a very strong relationship. Then from Surah Ash-Sharh to Surah At-Teen after it, there's a very strong relationship. Thinking about that, trying to extract things. Tafsir also helps you in this regards because they usually make points about some of these things as well. By the way, relationships here is a whole branch of tafsir called munasabat. Then I could look at word choice, and even if you don't have access to the Arabic, you can still access it. Why was it Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak? Why did it come as a negative question? Alam. Why did it use this word Nashrah? It could have used another expression to give a similar meaning. Why did it expressly talk to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Alam Nashrah Laka, you, O Prophet. Why didn't it say, O Muslims, did we not, sort of expand all of your chests? It could have expressed it another way. So why did it express it this way? And this is something to think about. Arabic secrets. And this is like sort of the realm of people that have spent that time going to Arabic. Then you can sort of understand little Arabic secrets in the surah. Inna ma'al usri yusra, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. The al, what does the al mean in both and things like that? Especially in a surah like Ash-Sharh, there's a strong relationship between that and seerah. Then it makes me reflect about the Prophet ﷺ. Maybe I want to go through and look at certain sections of the seerah and relate it back to this surah. And this is my contemplation. And then this point here about relevance to me in my world is probably the key point of contemplation. I need to find, why is this sort of relevant to me? It was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, a person in modern day Saudi Arabia, but in Mecca, 1400 years ago. What's that relevance to me in my world, which is vastly different, and the situations that I find, and the challenges that I find myself in. So you need to find that relevance, and there is that relevance. It does exist. There's a cool website called Quran Reflect, where people post up basically reflections on ayat. And apparently there is a vetting process. They go through and they make sure people don't just post nonsense and incorrect things. Last point that I'd like to make about contemplation, because it is your own effort and you're not necessarily trained in tafsir or a scholar of tafsir, you should make sure that you are not just going off and saying, hey, I can just say anything about this surah and come up with weird conclusions. You need to stick, you can't explain the Quran just off your own whims. So you still need to stick with the people of knowledge and take advantage of the fact that we do have knowledgeable people in the community. So you can ask your local imam. For example, in MIA, we asked Sheikh Abu Ubaidah, what does this ayah mean? Is this thought that I have correct? What do you think of this? You come up with some questions for him. Take advantage of him. Inshallah, maybe he doesn't answer, or anyone else. And you can even ask, and maybe if they don't know, they can ask someone else. They can do research and so forth. It's It's that's the sort of process that we need to find ourselves in. And the last is to apply, and this is a very, very, very important point, of course. And that is, what can I extract from this ayah, or what can I extract from this surah overall that I can implement in my life and that affects me? Or another question, how can I become Surah Ash-Sharh walking? Like the Prophet ﷺ was the Quran walking. How can I become a person where I've implemented this surah in my life? I'll give you some examples of, for example, Surah Ash-Sharh, some of the things that I could do with respect to that. And number one is, so it's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings, where, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after the Prophet ﷺ had a period of his chest was confined in the sense that he was very sad and he had difficulties in his life. I could write a journey. I could look back and I could journal. Maybe I'm going through some difficulties now. I'll journal that so I can read it later and I can see, wow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did put me through these difficulties, but I did have that ease afterwards. I can go through a reflection activity, things that have happened in my life and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken me out of it, all of these blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me. I can, for example, one example of application is that the ayah says, وَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. So if you're finished from your work and finished from things, then become tired and tire yourself in the worship of Allah. So for example, many people pray the witr prayer, which is either strongly recommended sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or some scholars say that it's compulsory actually. The witr prayer, many people, they pray it directly after the Isha. They pray Isha and then they'll pray their witr, which is of course a great action. But the Prophet ﷺ, he actually recommended, he advised Abu Hurairah, and utiya qabla an anam, and I pray witr right before I go to sleep. So I'm going to finish from all my activities. I'm going to leave the witr prayer until right before I sleep. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pray my witr prayer and then go to sleep. So this is a very beautiful embodiment of وَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. So I'm going to try to make that a regular action. I'm going to do it today and then tomorrow and then the day after, 2 weeks of doing it. And then it becomes a habit. It just becomes, it's actually not very hard, but it is a little bit hard because, you pray Isha and then you do something else and then you have to pray again. But it's actually very, very beautiful. وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. So I'm going to see that last ayah, and to your Lord, you should have desire, and only to your Lord you should have that desire. And then that tells me importance of tazkiyah, importance of my heart, importance of sincerity. So I'm going to start and, for example, study a book in the science of tazkiyah and so forth. So these are actions that I can take from the surah. Then spread. So after I've got this understanding, or along the process, I should mention it to a family member, to a friend. I should share some of my reflections and contemplations. If I have an opportunity to teach or to mentor or anything, you can always bring this stuff in. You're just giving a pep talk, or you're teaching mathematics. You can bring this stuff in, and you can make it part of your da'wah to the people, and you can spread the beautifulness and your love that you have for this ayah. The love you have for this ayah is contagious. People love to see that love that you have. And here we have then finished an implementation of those 6 dues of the Quran. So what I'm recommending, and what I really hope that we're able to take from today, is that we want to try to implement these 6 dues of the Quran with respect to a short surah in the next 2 weeks. And with that, we are seeking Jannah with 1 surah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to interact in that way, and allow us to indeed in the next 2 weeks spend that, it's a small amount of effort, but to really enjoy that and to have the fruits of that in the rest of our life. Ameen. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I'll make complete credits to my one of my teachers in Medina, Professor Muhammad Nasif, one of the teachers in Jami' Islamiyya, Islamic University. And he actually gave a khutbah called Utlub al-Jannah bi Surah, which is like direct plagiarism. And you'll see that a lot of the stuff I've taken is directly from this khutbah, including he did a case study of Surah, and it just happened that I decided to do that as well. You can find the lecture on YouTube. It's in Arabic, so yeah, you can benefit. So I'll just give an opportunity if anyone had questions from the chat box. I'll just have a look. There was any question. I don't believe anyone had any comments. I can't see any comments. There's one comment. If there's anyone that would like to comment, I'll stick around, I suppose, on the thread, and I can answer any questions, inshallah. If you want to go back and check the resources, there are, I think this live stream will be available, so you can go back to the video, inshallah. وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.